Well, hello there, friends and followers of the NTM Garage. Welcome to NTM HQ, where today we're going to continue the theme, unfortunately, away from cars while we still have the leg being repaired, but something that a fair few might find reasonably useful. And today we're going to add the facility to put an external mic on a Sony 405 camcorder, CX-405. Right, so here's the camera in question. This is the camera we use to film most of our videos that we put on YouTube and Facebook, etc. Now, it's nothing flash, but it certainly does a good enough job for what we need it to do. One thing it particularly does lack, though, is the facility for an external microphone. So we're going to adapt. We've seen a guy in the US who said he's done this quite successfully, but he wasn't able to find much in the way of the English language version of doing this. So he did one. It was a little bit clunky. Hopefully this is a bit more straightforward. So some of the parts we need to do this job. Specifically, a socket 3.5mm for plugging the said external microphone into, that will be connected to the internal microphone. The 6mm drill bit, which is the size we need, 5.5 to 6mm would be the right size to mount this said socket to the back of the camera, which will be on this panel at the back behind where the battery goes in. It's a storage area for a spare battery. I don't need a spare battery, so it'll be a good spot for us to put that socket. Okay, small Phillips head screwdriver for undoing the connectors in the camera. If you've got a jeweler's set of Phillips head screwdrivers, that's going to be even better. I don't today, but this one will do the job. We have the soldering iron and solder for connecting up the wires to the various spots internally. As we pull it apart, we're possibly going to need some sort of a little pick system. So I've got my picks here. If you've got a plastic pick of some description, it's probably going to be better because it may do less marks on the casing of the camera, but we'll do this gently to hopefully not result in any visible marks. We've got a piece of card up here for keeping a tab on where all of the screws come out of the camera, so we know where to put them back. Now that will become more evident as the process goes on. I've got an old charging cable here that, as you can see by the connections on the end, she's had a hard life. Not serviceable, so we're going to take some of the fine wires out of the internal of this charging cable and use that to connect up the internals. So that's what we've got. Righto folks, well, it's about this time I'm going to do a little bit of a disclaimer, and the disclaimer is about how good you are with electronics. Now, I'm no electronics whiz. Trust me, I'm certainly far from it. But I have built the odd, Dick Smith kit and done a little bit of work with soldering irons and components and stuff like that. So I'm not an expert, but I'm not a beginner. This job certainly is not something for a beginner, because when you get internal, and you'll see a little bit further down the track, these microphones that are inside these cameras are fairly small connections, and particularly where they hook onto the ribbon wire that you see, you've got to be pretty proficient with your soldering iron. Really quick dabs, accurate spots, otherwise you're going to mess the whole thing up. So do this with care. First cab off the rank is to remove this back panel and mount the actual socket. So to begin with, we're just going to open up the battery cover on the underside of the back. As you can see, we've already removed the battery. There's a plate there that is where a spare battery can go if you choose to do so. We're not going down that path, but we undo this screw here and we will unclip this rear cover to mount the socket. So we've undone this little screw here at the back. We pull it out. We'll stick it into the relevant spot on the card, and as you can see, we've marked the card, and so we'll just fit all of the screws as we take them out into the relevant places where they have come out of on the card. With the viewing lens open, go to this side section of the cover, and with just some gentle persuasion underneath the edge of that cover, I use my thumbnail, that unclips. Oh, as you can see, it just comes away. So that was a simple part. Let's drill a hole in there and we'll mount the socket into the back. With the hole drilled, we've mounted the socket into that back panel, just for the purposes of trial fitment initially, so plenty of room in the back there. We are going to have to remove it so we can connect up particularly that earth connection that's right down deep at the front there. So yeah, happy with that. Let's move on. So the next step of the process is not nearly so easy. What we're looking for is behind those holes that are in that front panel under the lens is where the microphones are. So we need to solder some small wires to the back of the microphones, run them internal to the casing, right up to the back, probably down this side where the handle is because there's a bit more room, come out the back here and connect up to where we've created that socket on the back cover. So I've jumped ahead a little bit here, and I have essentially removed all of the screws from the outer case. And if we look at our little board over here, you can see that I have put the screws in the board, one, so that we don't lose them, and two, we know where they've all come out of, just in case there happens to be one of a slightly different length. What I've noticed as they've come out, they all seem to be the same, but just in case, we know where they've come from. So we also know where to put them back. We don't go wondering, oh, what have I missed if I've got an excess screw left over. So that's where we're at. Let's pull the casing apart. So the first thing I've done at this stage is just, again with the thumbnail under the edge at the bottom of this cover, that levers up, and then if you twist it around so that just here, this little cover near the viewfinder screen, if you lever that back, because there is a little tab in the back there, and with some gentle persuasion, you will be able to get this cover entirely off, like so. Now that exposes a fair bit of where we need to go. We've still got to get this front section off to get into those microphones, so we'll keep probing. This cover here around near the lens in front of the viewfinder screen, with again a fingernail just really gently around this front edge, did pop that screen off. So we've got to one side, now we just need to get to the other. Well, with a gentle levering up of this chrome section at the back of the lens cover and some really, really gentle manoeuvring, this whole section will just pop off. Again, let's not be forceful on any of this because you will break some of these little plastic connectors. There's no need to be forceful as these parts will come apart. If you just be gentle with them, you don't need to force it. So at this stage, there is a screw just here behind where the actual microphones themselves are to get this whole lens section off. To get into the back of these microphones, we will need to take that one off. Now again, starting at the top, gentle levering up to release the clip there, little bit of gentle levering either side, and be very, very careful. There is a ribbon connector at the bottom of this particular piece that we're opening up. So don't go mucking around with that one real hard, because you will break that and it'll be game over for the front of your camera. So now we need to get the little plastic cover behind the microphones off, so that we can get access to the back of the microphones, where we shall be soldering some wires. And across the front of this section is like a rubbery felt type film that's got like a bit of an adhesive on it, that again, really gently with a nail you can get underneath it and prise it away from the plastic. And as much as it doesn't want to behave while I'm playing on the camera, if you pull that back, you've got the two connectors on the back of the microphone, and there's one on the other side as well. That's where we're soldering to. One more tool I didn't include at the start was a good pair of side cutters. I've got a nice little fine tip pair here. I'm going to get in and start dissecting this cord and get a couple of good cables out of there to wire in place. The other thing I didn't include was a multimeter multi-tester, so that you can find which is the common earth on those two microphones. But we'll get to those in a minute. And as we said before, this cable has seen better days, so we're going to cut into it, and we're going to find ourselves a couple of decent strands that we can use. Hopefully 2 or 3 that we can use to run internally that aren't too big. Well, we cut open the USB cable, and we've found 3 different coloured wires that we've been able to utilise out of that USB cable, or the charge cable I should say. So now the red is quite a bit heavier in gauge than the white and the green. And if we go consistent with a lot of other places, we'll go that the white and green will be left and right. Red normally is hot, but in this case it's going to be common. So one of the things we've got to do here is determine the polarity of these two microphones. So we've got our continuity tester. We'll just have to touch the continuity tester on the back of a couple of these terminals and see if we can find ourselves a common earth. This could be a bit tedious to look at, but bear with me a little bit. Okay, so we've just used our resistance or continuity tester to test which are common, and it would seem that with the wires coming up to the microphone, both of the right hand terminals are common and the left hand terminals are your left and right positive supply. So we'll take one common lead, probably from where this red probe is pointing at, here on the right hand microphone on the outside, and then we'll take on the left hand side of that particular microphone, we'll take a positive lead from there, then we'll take the positive lead from the left hand terminal where the black probe is pointing, and they will be the 3 connectors we require to go back to the socket on the back of the unit. Let's get out the soldering iron. Okay, well, this is that moment where the red-eyed monster called anger has kicked in, because right at the critical moment of what I'm doing with trying to adapt a microphone to this camera, the mobile phone, which I'm using to record the video instead of my normal camera, has decided to drop its guts, and only through the editing process I've found out that everything I've filmed, soldering up the wires, closing up the camera, connecting everything up, gone, the whole bloody lot. So from this point on, I've got a couple of stills, I've got a couple of bits and pieces. I'll try and see if I can show you the rest of the process. Putting the camera back together is no big deal, it's just a reverse of what you saw opening it up. But the next process is to access the microphone chambers to feed some wires through so we can solder them onto the back of the microphones themselves, and what we do where that little red arrow is, and also on the same position on the other side of that panel, because you need to get to both microphones, is we need to drill a small hole. So again, apologies, I've once again forgotten to add a tool at the start of what you need to do this job. An extra item you need to access those microphone chambers is a tiny little drill bit like such. Put a couple of little holes in the side of those chambers. Righto, so we've fed the wires through those tiny little holes. In fact, what you need to do first is solder the wires onto the back of the microphones and then feed them through the holes. Much easier. But here's where we go. I didn't get on the camera, which is a real shame. That I said at the very start, you need to be really careful with your soldering iron. Dill Billy here got the first microphone done, no problem. Feed the wire through the hole, pull it back, sit the microphone back in the chamber, hunky-dory. The second one, get the two wires, so we've got twice the heat. We need to be really careful here. We're trying to be very, very gentle with the soldering iron, and what have we done? We've applied too much heat and the whole microphone has dropped off the end of the ribbon cable. Anyway, what you will find, if you happen to be as unfortunate as I am, which is not a real smart thing to do, looking at the back of the microphone, this here is only about 3 or 4 millimeters wide. So we're talking about something very, very small. Two little soldering pads on the back of them. The fortunate thing is there is a polarity indicator on the back of the microphone, so we do know that when we go to connect it back up, where we looked at it before, we know where the polarity of the common earth and the positive connection. So on top of that, here is roughly what the ribbon cable looks like where it connects up to the microphone. And again, we're talking about something that is flat, dead flat, thus why it's called ribbon cable. 2, maybe 3 millimeters wide at the total on the outside, so these bits really, really close together. But these, that's where the connectors are that run through the ribbon cable. This is the 2 points where they solder up. So we were able to solder the microphone back to the ribbon cable with the wires connected without bridging any connections across. They were beautifully isolated, nothing was shorting, and we connected it up. Next question is, when we put it back together, is it going to work? Now once we reassembled the camera, all the casings are all back on, we've got these wires inside. This is roughly what it looks like at the back before we connect it up to the plug on the back panel. And with the wires soldered to the socket on that panel, it looks somewhat like this. And with the rear panel back in place, there's that lovely 3.5mm socket sticking out the back. Now comes the big moment of truth. We need to test the camera to see if it works with the internal microphones and with the new external mic. Well, this is testing the internal mics, and that's the phone that I was recording the video from up until this point. Now let's test an external mic. So, thrill seekers, if you're watching me now, more to the point, hearing me now, then the moment of truth final test is working. You're hearing me on a microphone separate to the camera. How good is that? Let's walk away. This is what the American fella did. Walk away. Hopefully you're still hearing me. And I'll walk back again and come back into shot. Remote microphone on my little Sony handycam. How good? We're a win on that. Thanks for watching. If you want to do this, it's not a difficult process, but do so very much at your own risk because it's a little bit fiddly. Don't ruin your camera like I almost did, but the end result, if you get it done right, is very rewarding. I'm super excited. So again, thanks for watching. The leg's getting better. We're almost back onto cars again. See you in the next one.